USDA layoffs affecting more than 5,000 employees have been rescinded by the U.S. Merit Board. New Mexico's congressional delegation responds to a decision by President Donald Trump's administration to grant a one-month reprieve to automakers from the 25% tariffs. New Mexico lawmakers are advancing a bill to create a new trust fund to help pay for Medicaid programs in future years. And a standoff is developing between the mayor's office and city council over paramedic staffing at AFR. From the Albuquerque Journal, this is the leading news. I'm Gino Gutierrez. It's Thursday, March 6th, and I'll have more on those stories in a few moments, plus a look at Albuquerque's weather forecast on the other side of this break.
This episode is brought to you by the Kirtland Partnership Committee. For 30 years, we've been dedicated to supporting, growing, and preserving the Kirtland National Security Complex. We work tirelessly to enhance military readiness, foster community partnerships, improve quality of life, and promote economic development right here in New Mexico. Join us in our mission to ensure that Kirtland remains a cornerstone of national security and a key provider of quality jobs and investment for all of Greater Albuquerque. Together, we can make a powerful impact. Kirtland Partnership Committee, proudly shaping the future of our national security for 30 years.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA, has been ordered to reinstate more than 5,000 employees who were abruptly laid off as part of President Trump's attempts to reduce the federal workforce. The U.S. Merit Systems Protection Board ruled that the USDA must stay their terminations of these employees, citing potential legal violations in how the layoffs were conducted.
So this is an order from the Merit Board.
My colleague Kathy Cook covers the federal government for the Journal.
And they have decided that the USDA, improperly fired some people because it sent out these identical termination letters that said that people were fired because of performance. And so the board says, hey, wait a minute, you have to rehire them for 45 days.
The department now has 5 days to comply, and employees will remain in their positions at least until April 18th. The ruling affects a wide range of USDA workers, including forestry technicians, biologists, and park rangers. Many of those laid off received identical termination letters citing performance issues, a claim some say is unfounded. Jordan Martinez, a former wildlife biologist at Carson National Forest, says the decision gives her hope for a fair process.
It would be a difference because at least I would hopefully know then that it was based off of legitimate reasons, not just saying, not because of false accusations based off of my performance. I was really worried moving forward that would be on my record, and it's not true.
A key issue in the case is the difference between a performance-based termination and a formal reduction in force, or RIF. If these employees are eventually laid off through an RIF, rather than for alleged poor performance, they will receive severance pay and avoid a damaging record that could impact their future careers in federal service. Robert Prather, a former U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services biologist who was also laid off but is not covered under this ruling, says the terminations have unfairly damaged the reputation of many high-performing employees.
There's a lot of, consequences associated with the way they chose to fire us, and it's a stain on our record that nobody deserves.
Many former USDA employees, including Susan Runyon, are still waiting for confirmation of their reinstatement. Meanwhile, others are scrambling to find new work, with some attending job fairs and looking into other career options. The USDA has not issued a public statement on the ruling. For now, thousands of federal workers remain in limbo, waiting to see if they will return to their jobs or face layoffs again in the near future. The Trump administration has granted automakers a one-month delay on tariffs amid an escalating trade war, but the move did little to calm concerns from New Mexico lawmakers. U.S. Senator Ben Ray Lujan criticized the tariffs as reckless, warning they could lead to higher prices on essentials like groceries, energy, cars, and costing American families up to $2,000 annually. The auto industry had urged Trump to waive the 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada, fearing job losses, plant closures, and risking vehicle prices.
Yeah, well, it's important to understand that the relationship between automaking in the United States has always revolved around labor and in Canada and Mexico, and in fact, during the Great Recession.
My colleague Justin Garcia is a business reporter for the Journal.
The Canadian government offered to help bail out the auto industry, so it's a really long, deep connection there. And so obviously any change in terms of any kind of protectionist policies regarding that is hugely affects those industries.
Despite the temporary exemption, White House Press Secretary Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed the tariffs would take effect on April 2nd. Following the announcement, auto stocks surged up to 6%. Democratic U.S. Representative Gabe Vasquez dismissed the delay as insufficient, arguing the tariffs were an unnecessary disruption harming farmers, ranchers, manufacturers, and border communities. Trump, however, remained open to exemption requests from other industries. Given the U.S. auto sector's reliance on labor from Mexico and Canada, the ongoing trade dispute continues to raise concerns about economic stability. New Mexico lawmakers are advancing a bill to create a Medicaid trust fund in response to potential federal funding cuts. The bill, Senate Bill 88, passed the Senate unanimously 37-0 and now moves to the House. Currently, Medicaid covers about 40% of New Mexico's population, making it a critical state program. The trust fund, supported by investment earnings from the state treasurer's office, is expected to grow to $2 billion over time. Once fully funded, it could distribute about $100 million annually to support Medicaid services. Lawmakers see this as a proactive step to safeguard healthcare access if federal budget cuts materialize.
I think legislators are kind of seeing, hey, we have this chance right now.
My colleague Dan Boyd is the Journal's Capitol Bureau Chief and has been covering the legislative session.
We're not sure what's going to happen in Washington, D.C., but either way, we have this opportunity to kind of set up this new fund that would give us a little bit of a buffer if that were to happen, given the state's kind of exposure on Medicaid issues and their reliance on federal funding.
While some Republicans argue that federal cuts will target fraud rather than essential services, Democrats warn that a 12 to 13% reduction in federal Medicaid funding could force the state to find $1.1 billion to maintain coverage. The bill includes contingency measures to use trust fund monies for Medicaid if federal cuts occur, with this authority lasting 3 years starting in July. New Mexico's Medicaid spending has risen significantly from $3.7 billion in 2011 to $10.4 billion in 2024. Given its importance, advocates including Think New Mexico have pushed for a trust fund to ensure stability and improve provider reimbursement rates. With uncertainty over federal support, the proposed fund aims to secure Medicaid's future for New Mexicans. The Albuquerque City Council has passed a resolution requiring 2 paramedics on all ambulances responding to rescue calls, putting it at odds with Mayor Tim Keller's administration and Albuquerque Fire Rescue leadership. The measure, sponsored by Councilors Dan Lewis and Joaquin Baca, passed in a 7-2 vote, with Councilors Tammy Feeblecorn and Brooke Brisson opposing. It counters a proposed AFR policy that would allow a firefighter with basic EMT training to replace one of the paramedics, a move the fire chief said would improve efficiency amid an ongoing paramedic shortage. However, despite the council passing this resolution, City Attorney Lauren Keefe warned that the council may be overstepping its authority, suggesting that the mayor's office has the right to determine staffing levels. The Keller administration has also filed complaints against Baca and Lewis with the Labor Management Relations Board, arguing that the issue should be resolved through labor negotiations, not legislation. Representatives of the firefighters union have opposed the staffing changes, urging councilors to maintain existing paramedic requirements. The resolution now awaits Mayor Keller's decision.
Well, I asked today if the mayor planned to veto it, and at the moment...
My colleague Noah Kalabach is the city government reporter for the Journal.
It sounds like he and his administration are banking on AFR leadership and the union figuring it out, but the resolution does await his signature, so we'll see what happens.
But the question remains whether the council has the authority to enforce it. If you like hearing all of the latest news from the Albuquerque Journal here on the Leading News, consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal. You can check our show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription and keep up with all the latest news from New Mexico's leading news source. And in legislative news, New Mexico Senate Bill 505, which would mandate university police officers to use body cameras, is advancing towards a final vote. The bill, sponsored by Senator Joseph Cervantes, seeks to correct an oversight in a 2020 law that required state and local police to wear body cameras but did not explicitly include university officers. The bill clarifies that officers who intentionally disable or tamper with their cameras could be held liable for evidence destruction, though technological failures would not be penalized. UNM is the only state university yet to implement body cams, despite having the highest number of police encounters. While UNM announced plans last year to adopt the technology, it is yet to fully implement it. Cervantes says the change should not require public outcry or negative press to take effect. And a bill allocating $2 million to recruit healthcare workers back to New Mexico is headed to the Senate after passing the House in a 39-21 vote. House Bill 15 would establish a strategic recruitment program targeting medical professionals who graduate from New Mexico institutions but left the state. Supporters, including Representative Mariana Anaya, say the funding is necessary to address workforce shortages. However, some Republicans argue that reforming medical malpractice laws would be a more effective solution. Debate over malpractice caps and liability continues, with related legislation stalled in committee. Despite the contentious discussion, House Bill 15 passed, and Anaya celebrated with a brief rendition of Proud Mary, a lighthearted House tradition for first-time bill sponsors. Now taking a look at Albuquerque's weather forecast. Today you can expect patchy blowing dust after 11 a.m., mostly cloudy, with a high near 66. And as for this evening, more patchy blowing dust is expected before 8 p.m., mostly clear, with a low around 34. To keep up with all the latest news from the Albuquerque Journal, you can visit our website at abqjournal.com. I'm Gino Gutierrez. The leading news will be back tomorrow.